Halls of Atonement is a returning dungeon we'll be taking on in Season 3 of The War Within. The dungeon starts with a 31-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that time frame, you will upgrade your key. At the start of the dungeon, you'll want to get Bloodlust on cooldown as soon as possible, so you'll most likely head to the nearby Shard of Halkias, grabbing some other mobs on the way. The Shard is going to be your priority target, as its Thrash cast will deal substantial party-wide damage over 8 seconds. Players will want to commit a defensive to this. They will also target all players with Sinquake, which spawns circles under your feet which need to be moved out of or you'll likely die. There are 3 shards of Halkias dotted around the first area of the dungeon, and all 3 must be killed in order for you to engage the first boss. Surrounding these shards, you'll find some caster mobs, including the scary kick mob for this area, the Depraved Collectors. Their Siphon Life ability is now a channel that will target a random player and leech large amounts of health from that player every 3 seconds. Make sure to kick this ability as soon as possible. The second caster mob in this area, the Depraved Obliterators, cast Wicked Bolt, which deals a decent amount of shadow damage. So you should use any spare kicks that you have on this, as it can get scary with overlaps or lots of casts going off. They will also randomly put a debuff on players, Mark of Obliteration, that explodes in an 8-yard AoE around players after a long 12 seconds. This deals no damage if it's dispelled, so healers need to look out for this and dispel quickly, especially if multiple marks are out. If it's about to explode though, make sure to pop a defensive. Tanks and healers should be aware of the Anima Tainted Armor debuff applied to the tank by Depraved Dark Blades in this area. This increases damage taken by 2% and stacks infinitely. Healers should keep an eye on stacks and use any spare dispels, and tanks should press mitigation when necessary if stacks are getting high. The final mobs in these first pools are Toiling Groundskeepers. While they don't do much themselves, they will get skittish at 30% HP and run away terrified. This can ninja pull other random mobs in the dungeon, which can get out of hand very quickly, so try and CC them or nuke them down when you see them running away. The next mobs that you'll likely encounter are the Patrolling Depraved Houndmasters, which are accompanied by 2 Vicious Gargants. Gargants will take 25% reduced damage while in range of these Houndmasters, so be sure to focus the Houndmasters down, which you'll be doing anyway because of their scary kick, Loyal Beast. This cast will enrage all nearby Gargants within 4 yards, increasing their attack speed by 200% and making them immune to crowd control, so it is vital that you kick this or your tank will fall over. Throughout the dungeon you'll find Stoneborn Slashers. These large gargoyles do periodically turn to stone, so you can skip them, but you'll most likely pull a few for percentage. Tanks should be aware of their Stone Fist Tank Buster, as it deals a decent amount of damage and knocks you back, so try and position against the wall to avoid being knocked into other mobs and use a defensive. They will then follow this up with Powerful Swipe, which is a lethal frontal that targets the tank, so try and face the mob away from the group, and all players should step out of this. Their final ability, Disrupting Screech, deals a large amount of group-wide damage and also interrupts all spell casting for 4 seconds. Prepare defensives when necessary and try to avoid casting as you see the cast finishing to prevent yourself from being silent. As you clear your way through the dungeon in order to kill all 3 shards, you'll encounter the same mobs we've just gone over. When the 3rd shard is down, return to the central boss arena to fight the first boss of the dungeon, Halkias. Halkias is surrounded by a large circle that fears anyone outside of it for 8 seconds, so be sure to stack within this circle. You'll want to be near the boss anyway to drop the puddles left by Heave Debris, which targets a random player dealing fatal damage in the form of a swirly, and also splashes party-wide sonic damage that should be healed through. Try and position towards the back wall before being targeted to drop the pulls neatly, and then move out when the swirly shows. Tanks will also be targeted by a similar swirly with Crumbling Slam. However, you cannot move out of this and you will need to press a defensive for each tank buster. This will also deal the same party-wide sonic damage. At 100 energy, the boss will then cast Refracted Sinlight, shooting out 4 rotating beams of shadow damage that last for 15 seconds. Tanks will need to be prepared to move the boss away from the previously placed puddles before this ability so that players can dodge the beams and not run into these puddles. Note that the rotation can randomly swap directions, so keep on your toes here. After Halkias has fallen, you can head left or right up the stairs to the next area of the dungeon. For the sake of this guide and efficiency, we'll head right. This area has lots of patrolling mobs in close-knit groups, so you'll want to be prepared for ninja pulls. Your new focus mob in this area are Stoneborn Reavers. These mobs hit the tank with a nasty tank buster in Mortal Strike, dealing upfront physical damage and leaving a 35% healing received reduction for 6 seconds. This debuff can stack, so be careful pulling multiple Reavers at a time. They will also cast Turn to Stone, which surrounds them with an 8-yard large AoE physical hit, and turns players to stone for 8 seconds if caught, so be sure to move out of this. One of the patrolling mobs in this area are packs of Stone Fiend Ankle Biters. These smallies randomly leap at players, dealing physical damage and leaving a stacking bleed which also slows players. These mobs can be surprisingly deadly, so press defensives if your stacks get high, and use healing cooldowns if necessary. The final new mobs in this area are Stoneborn Eviscerators. Their Hellglaive ability hits a random player with a decent amount of physical damage, which spreads to 5 additional targets within 8 yards. This is random, so it's hard to gauge, but press a defensive if you're low when fighting these. At the base of the stairs for the next boss, you'll find 2 of the Stoneborn slashers we mentioned earlier, but simply wait for them to turn to stone and run through them as they aren't efficient for percent. Upon reaching the arena, the tank should open the doors at the far end of the room to spawn the next boss, Echelon. Echelon will target a random player with Blood Torrent, creating a circle of toxic blood beneath the player's feet that should be moved out of. It will also leave a puddle that persists for 2.5 minutes that deals shadow damage over time to anyone standing in it. If possible, range can bait this towards the edge of the arena, which will make the boss's next mechanic much easier to deal with. Echelon will then summon adds with Stone Cool. These Undying Stone Fiends will cast Villainous Bolt on the tank that needs to be interrupted, as overlaps can prove fatal. The tank and players should gather these mobs onto the boss when they reach low HP, because rather than dying, they turn themselves to stone and regenerate to full HP over 30 seconds. However, when the boss reaches 100 energy, he will target a random player with Flesh to Stone. This is a ramping slow that will stun players within 5 yards for 3 seconds upon expiration. This player will need to move onto the regenerating Stone Fiends to hit them with the boss's follow-up ability, Stone Shattering Leap. As well as destroying any adds, this ability will leave a nasty 8-second nature dot on any player struck that will need to be mitigated with defensives and healing. After Echelon, we'll encounter many mobs we fought already, focus down the Reavers while kicking the Loyal Beast cast from the Houndmasters, and tanks, be careful of the Gargants. We'll then encounter the third boss of the dungeon, High Adjudicator Aleez. Throughout the fight, Aleez will hit the tank with Anima Bolts, dealing a decent amount of shadow damage, so use any kicks you have on this. Occasionally, the boss will afflict 2 random players with Unstable Anima. This takes heavy shadow damage over 14 seconds to anyone within 5 yards, and this is dispellable, but you can use defensives if necessary, and you'll want to spread from other players with the debuff. You should also avoid the swirly spawned by the Anima Fountain, as these will most likely kill you. The scariest part of this fight is the damage during the add phase. The boss will spawn a ghostly partitioner that will fixate on a random player, so if targeted, you must kite towards the Anima Lanterns that are around the room. While the ad is up, Pulse from Beyond will deal lethal amounts of ramping party-wide damage, so be sure to lead them to the Anima Lanterns as quickly as possible. Use personal defensives to help your healer here, and use healing cooldowns where necessary. After Aleez has fallen, we'll face our last trash of the dungeon, Inquisitor Sigar. He will continuously cast the Wicked Bolt that we saw in Obliterators earlier, so once again use any kicks that you have on this. If you have the damage, you can try and burn down Sigar before he casts Dark Communion, however this will get harder and harder as the key level increases. During his Dark Communion cast, he will channel into up to 6 of the nearby tormented souls, creating manifestations of envy and healing himself every tick for 2% of his health. These manifestations of envy that spawn will fixate on random players for 15 seconds, so be aware of that and use a defensive if needed, but try not to kite them away from the mini-boss though, so that players can cleave them down. Sigar will also target these adds with Disperse Sin, leaving a puddle of shadow damage on the ground that can prove deadly if you stand in it for too long, so keep an eye on your feet here. Sigar's final ability, Display of Power, will infuse all players with Anima, dealing a small amount of damage over time, and increasing all damage and healing done by 30% for 15 seconds. When the debuff expires, players will explode, dealing big shadow damage to anyone within 10 yards, so make use of this damage buff, but make sure to spread as it expires, as the overlaps of the explosion can kill you. There are a few ways to deal with this room of the dungeon. As mentioned, at lower keys you can just burst Sigar down before he heals if you have the damage, or you can focus the adds dotted around the room so he has nothing to heal off of, or you can simply chip away at his health before each communion phase while cleaving down the adds. Our final boss of the dungeon is Lord Chamberlain. The main mechanic for this boss are the 4 statues surrounding him as you begin the encounter. Throughout the fight, the boss will cast Telekinetic Toss, throwing one of these statues in a line towards a player marked by a red arrow below the statue. If targeted, make sure to avoid the statue being hurled, as it will most likely one-shot you. The statue will also deal heavy party-wide AoE damage upon reaching its destination, which is increased dramatically if it collides with another statue, so try and position in a way that prevents this, and use defensives where necessary. Chamberlain will also periodically hit the tank with Stigma of Pride, leaving a nasty shadow dot that deals 30% more damage per tick for 18 seconds. Tanks should use mitigation, and healers can also help with externals. All players need to be aware of the Unleash Suffering frontal cone that's aimed at the tank. Simply move out of the way if you're caught in this. At 70% and 40% HP, the boss will then cast Chamberlain's Chorus. This teleports him to the middle of the room and pulls all statues towards him before knocking them out. Once again, avoid being hit by the statues, but be prepared to stoke the next ability for this phase, Ritual of Woe. Chamberlain will channel beams of anima towards each statue, dealing massive amounts of party-wide damage to all players if contact is made with the statue, so your party will need to spread around the boss to soak and intercept these beams to prevent a wipe. These beams, however, do tick for a decent amount of damage, so use defensives and healing cooldowns to help your healer out. The final ability for this boss is Erupting Torment. Periodically, the boss will surround himself and all statues with large circles of shadow damage that deal significant damage to players' core. Move out of these circles to avoid being one-shot. But that's all you need to know for this fight, and that wraps up Halls of Atonement in Mythic Plus. If you're interested in my nameplates, they are from my free plates profile, which can be found inside my Discord. The link will be in the description. And if this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.